The office was always full of noise in the mornings. Phones ringing, printers humming, people rushing with coffee cups in hand. In the middle of that rush, a new face appeared one Monday morning. She walked in quietly, clutching a small bag and a folder of documents. Her clothes were simple, neat but clearly not expensive. Her shoes were old, the soles a bit worn, but she had polished them the best she could. She smiled politely at everyone as she was introduced around the office. Some people greeted her warmly. Others barely looked up from their screens. She didn't seem to mind. She just wanted to do her job well. Her manager, however, noticed her right away. The manager was known for her sharp dressing and even sharper tongue. She liked everything around her to look perfect, from reports to wardrobes. When she saw the new assistant's shoes, she raised an eyebrow, then forced a smile. "Welcome to the team," she said, her voice polite but her eyes glancing down. "I see you're ready to work hard. That's quite the pair of shoes." The new employee nodded with a small smile, pretending not to notice the hidden remark. She simply replied, "Yes, they've been with me for a while." The manager laughed softly and moved on to another topic, but a few co-workers caught the tone. A couple of them exchanged small looks, half amused, half awkward. The new employee's first day went quietly. She was assigned to organize files, update spreadsheets, and assist with meeting schedules. She worked carefully, double-checking everything before sending it in. Her desk was tidy, her handwriting neat, and she spoke politely to everyone. But as the day went on, the manager kept finding small ways to point out her shoes. During a meeting, she said with a grin, "Maybe we should add dress code improvements to our office goals this quarter." A few people laughed, unsure if they should. The new employee kept her eyes on her notebook, jotting down notes, pretending not to hear. When she went to refill her coffee, she overheard two colleagues whispering near the counter. "She seems nice," one said. "Yeah, but did you see her shoes?" The other replied softly. "I think the manager's going to have a field day." She took a quiet breath, smiled to herself, and walked away without saying a word. That night, she got home tired but proud that she had made it through her first day. Her apartment was small but clean. She took off her shoes and placed them near the door, rubbing her feet gently. They were her only pair that still looked decent enough for work. She had planned to buy new ones soon, but rent and bills had to come first. She reminded herself that someday things would get better. The next morning, she arrived early again. She preferred calm moments before the office got loud. She cleaned her desk, checked emails, and prepared the meeting notes before anyone else arrived. When the manager came in, she noticed. "You're early," the manager said, surprised. "Trying to make a good impression, I see." The new employee smiled. "I just like being ready before the rush starts." The manager nodded, but her eyes again went to the shoes. "Still holding on to those, huh?" she said lightly. The employee just said, "They've got a few miles left in them." The manager laughed again, loud enough for a few people nearby to hear. "You're loyal to your shoes." "That's rare." Some of the staff chuckled softly. It wasn't cruel laughter, but it made the new employee's chest tighten for a second. She just smiled faintly and went back to typing. As the days passed, she began learning faster than anyone expected. She handled tasks with care, noticed small errors in reports that others missed, and stayed late whenever someone needed help. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed. Even the older employees started admiring her work ethic. But the jokes about her shoes continued. They weren't always direct, but they came up in small ways. During lunch, the manager once said, "We're having a team photo next week. Everyone, make sure you look your best from head to toe." Then, looking straight at her, she added with a smile, "Especially the toe part." Everyone laughed softly. The new employee just nodded and kept eating quietly. That evening, when the office was empty, she stayed behind to finish printing the next day's reports. The cleaner, an older woman, noticed her sitting there alone. "You're still here?" the cleaner asked kindly. "Yes, just finishing something up," she said. "You work hard," the cleaner said. "Don't let people make you feel small." "I know what it's like." The new employee smiled gratefully. "Thank you. I'm just trying to do my best." When she left that night, she looked down at her shoes again. They were tired looking, yes, but they had carried her through tough times. Job interviews, long walks to work, errands for her family. They weren't just shoes. They were part of her story. At the end of her first week, there was a short Friday meeting. The manager praised the team for good progress, then turned toward her and said with a teasing smile, "Our new star is fitting in nicely." We might have to start a fund for her wardrobe next. Everyone laughed again, even though it was uncomfortable. The new employee smiled politely, though her heart ached. She wondered why kindness was so hard for some people. She told herself not to cry, not at work. After the meeting, she went back to her desk, focusing on the pile of tasks waiting for her. A quiet coworker from accounting came over with a small cup of coffee. "Here," he said softly. "I thought you could use this." "Thank you," she said, surprised. He hesitated, then added, "Don't let her get to you. Some people measure worth in clothes. Others measure it in character. You're doing fine." His words stayed with her all weekend. She realized not everyone saw her the way the manager did. Some people still noticed effort, not just appearance. Monday came again. She arrived early, as usual. The manager breezed in wearing new designer heels, complimented by several staff members. She looked at the employee's shoes again, but said nothing this time. Maybe she had run out of comments, or maybe she just didn't feel like repeating herself. The day was busy. A new project was coming up, and everyone had deadlines. The new employee quietly worked through her tasks, always organized, always patient. She helped a colleague fix a formatting issue and volunteered to deliver files to another department. By the end of the day, even the manager had to admit to herself, though she wouldn't say it out loud, that this new assistant was unusually efficient. Still, she couldn't help but judge her for those old shoes. As the lights dimmed and people began leaving, the employee packed her bag. The office was quiet now, with only the sound of her soft footsteps as she walked out. She didn't know it yet, but those same footsteps were slowly leading her toward a moment that would change everything. Not just for her, but for the manager who had spent so much time judging her. The story was only beginning. The old shoes, the teasing, the quiet strength she carried, all of it would soon reveal something much deeper than anyone in that office could have imagined. The days began to settle into a routine. The new employee came in early every morning, long before most others. She liked the quiet, when the office was still waking up. It was peaceful, and she could focus without feeling watched. She would check emails, make coffee, and prepare documents before anyone else arrived. By the time the others came in, everything was ready. Reports stacked neatly, schedules printed, meetings arranged. She didn't brag about it. She simply believed that doing things well was its own reward. The manager, on the other hand, enjoyed being noticed. Every morning she would walk through the glass doors with her head high, heels clicking sharply against the floor. Her clothes were always perfectly pressed, her perfume noticeable but not too strong. People complimented her as she passed by, and she loved it. She liked control over her work, her team, and her image. So when she saw her new assistant sitting quietly in those same old shoes day after day, it bothered her more than she admitted. To her, appearance was a reflection of ambition, and she couldn't understand why someone would come to work looking so modest if they wanted to grow in a corporate world. During meetings, the manager sometimes gave small assignments meant to test the assistant's skill. "Can you handle the presentation slides for tomorrow?" Or "Make sure the client's file is updated by end of day." The employee never complained. She nodded, did her work, and made sure everything was perfect. The rest of the team started to notice her efficiency. Whenever something went wrong, a missing file, a delayed message, a mix-up in data, she was the one people turned to. She had a calm way of solving problems that made others trust her. But the manager didn't like how much attention she was getting. One afternoon, while the team was having lunch in the break room, the manager made another remark, this time disguised as humor. "You're all doing well," she said with a smile. "Especially our new recruit. Always on time, always working hard. Maybe we should take her shopping someday so her shoes can match her performance." A few people chuckled awkwardly. One coworker looked down, pretending to check his phone. Another stirred her tea quietly, avoiding eye contact. The employee smiled politely as always. "That's kind of you," she said softly. "But these ones have carried me through a lot. They still have life in them." The room went silent for a moment. The honesty in her tone made some people uncomfortable, even guilty. The manager blinked, caught off guard, then quickly changed the topic. Later that day, one of the co-workers, a quiet man from the finance team, stopped by her desk. "You handled that well," he said quietly. She smiled. "There's no use getting upset. It won't change anything." He nodded slowly. "Still, it takes strength to stay calm when others don't." As weeks passed, her presence in the office started changing the atmosphere. People began greeting her more warmly. Some asked for her help with their tasks because she always gave patient explanations. Others joined her during lunch breaks where she often shared light stories or asked about their families. The manager, however, started to feel left out. She noticed that laughter and conversations often happened when she wasn't around. She could sense a shift. People admired the assistant not for her looks or style, but for her kindness and work ethic. One morning, the manager called her into her office. The tone was neutral, maybe even slightly cold. "You've been doing well," she said, flipping through some papers. "Your reports are accurate and clients have given good feedback. But I need to remind you that this is a professional environment. Presentation matters. You represent the company." The employee nodded respectfully. "I understand," she said. "I mean everything. How you communicate, how you dress. It all sends a message," the manager continued. "I'll keep that in mind," the employee replied softly. The manager leaned back in her chair, expecting an apology or a sign of insecurity, but the employee's calm expression didn't show either. There was quiet confidence in her eyes, and it unsettled the manager a little. After she left the office, the manager sighed. She didn't understand how someone so young could stay so composed after constant remarks. Maybe she was too proud to care, or maybe she was stronger than she seemed. That week, the team had to prepare for a big presentation for a new client. Everyone was nervous because this project meant a lot for the company. The manager stayed late every night, reviewing slides and rehearsing her speech. The employee volunteered to help, staying until almost midnight to proofread reports and organize data. One evening, when most of the office had gone home, the manager looked up from her desk and saw her assistant still typing under the soft light of her lamp. "It's late," the manager said, standing by the doorway. "I know," the employee replied without looking up. "I just want to make sure everything is correct before tomorrow." The manager crossed her arms. "You don't have to do all this. That's my job." "I know," she said again with a gentle smile, "but we're a team." The manager didn't say anything for a while. She just stood there watching. The young woman's shoes sat beside her chair, slightly scuffed at the edges. Her socks were thin and her feet looked tired. But her focus didn't waver. Something inside the manager shifted a little that night, though she didn't admit it. The next morning, when the clients arrived, the presentation went perfectly. Every chart, every report, every visual was in order. The clients were impressed. They even mentioned how well organized the materials were. The manager took the praise with a smile, but deep down she knew who deserved the credit. After the meeting, when everyone was celebrating quietly, the manager gave her a small nod. "Good work," she said simply. "Thank you," the employee replied, smiling. For a brief moment there was mutual respect between them, fragile but real. But that peace didn't last long. The next day, during a casual coffee break, another employee made a light joke about her shoes again, and the manager, almost out of habit, laughed too. It wasn't meant to be cruel, but it stung just the same. The assistant stayed quiet, pretending to read an email. Later, the older man from finance approached the manager privately. "You know," he said calmly, "you might not realize it, but your jokes are starting to look bad." People noticed. The manager frowned. "What do you mean?" "She works harder than anyone here. And yet every time you tease her, you make it seem like effort doesn't matter. Only image does." The words stuck with her longer than she expected. That night, while choosing her outfit for the next day, she looked down at her own collection of shoes, neatly lined up, all designer brands. They were perfect, spotless. But for the first time, she wondered if they actually meant anything. She tried to push the thought away, but couldn't. Something about that quiet young woman and her worn-out shoes had started to unsettle everything she believed about success and value. And as much as she tried to ignore it, she sensed that a lesson was waiting for her, one that she didn't yet understand but soon would. The rain started early that morning, tapping softly against the office windows. It was one of those gray days when everything felt slow and heavy. The manager arrived a little later than usual, her umbrella dripping, her mood already sour from the traffic. She shook off the water from her jacket and sighed loudly as she entered. The new employee was already there, as always. Her hair slightly damp from the rain, but her smile steady. "Good morning," she said kindly, offering a tissue to the manager to dry her hands. The manager nodded briefly. Morning. What a miserable day, she muttered, walking toward her office. Her heels clicked loudly across the wet floor, but just before she reached her door, one heel slipped on the shiny tiles. She caught herself on the wall, startled. A small crack formed on her expensive shoe. The employee quickly hurried over. Are you okay? She asked, concerned. I'm fine, the manager said quickly, embarrassed. These floors are too slippery. She looked down at her heel and frowned. Perfect. Just what I needed today. Without hesitation, the assistant bent down slightly, wiping the water off the floor with a tissue. Here, let me get that before someone else slips, she said softly. The manager mumbled a quick thank you and walked into her office. But she couldn't stop thinking about how naturally kind the young woman had been. No hesitation. No judgment, just quiet help. As the morning went on, the rain worsened. Thunder rolled in the distance. The manager had a big client presentation that day, one she had prepared for weeks. The company's director was attending too, making it even more important. She had printed reports, charts, and visuals. Everything needed to impress. But just before noon, disaster struck. She was running to her car to grab an extra file when a passing car splashed muddy water across her suit. She gasped in shock, staring at her ruined clothes and the water-soaked papers in her hand. She rushed back inside, angry and panicked. The office staff looked up as she entered, dripping wet, her once perfect look completely gone. For the first time, the manager looked small, almost helpless. The new employee stood up immediately. Wait here, she said gently, running toward the supply closet. She came back with a clean towel and offered it without saying much. Then she quickly fetched a small fan from her desk and pointed it toward the wet papers. The manager was too stunned to react at first. You don't have to. It's okay, the employee interrupted softly. We can save some of these if we act fast. For the next few minutes, they worked together in silence. The employee carefully separated the damp pages, laying them flat on the table while the manager held the fan steady. Slowly, the papers began to dry. When they were done, the manager sat down, sighing deeply. Her cracked shoe, soaked clothes, and frizzy hair were nothing like the polished image she usually presented. She looked at her assistant and said quietly, You didn't have to do all that. The employee smiled. We all have bad days. It happens. Something in the manager's chest shifted slightly. It wasn't pity or pride, it was gratitude, mixed with a touch of guilt. Thank you, she said finally. Anytime, the employee replied, then added with a small grin, I can lend you my spare flats if you need them. They're not fancy, but they'll be dry. The manager looked at her surprised. You keep an extra pair? Yes, she said. They're old, but they're comfortable. I walk a lot, so I keep them here. For a moment, the manager hesitated. Her pride wanted to refuse, but her wet shoes were becoming unbearable. If you're sure, she said quietly. A few minutes later, she was standing in those borrowed flats. They were simple, worn, but oddly comfortable. She couldn't help but laugh under her breath. Well, she said, they're not my usual style, but they do the job. The assistant smiled. Sometimes comfort beats style. The manager nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. The meeting went on as planned that afternoon. Despite everything, it turned out well. The clients were understanding about the weather, and the presentation went smoothly. The manager found herself thinking less about her appearance and more about getting things right. And when she looked down during the presentation, she noticed those flats again. They weren't elegant, but they reminded her of humility, something she hadn't felt in a long time. After the clients left, the manager called her assistant into her office again. You really saved me today, she said sincerely. I don't think I've said this before, but you're very capable. Thank you, the assistant replied, her voice quiet but warm. The manager paused, then asked, Why do you only have one pair of shoes you wear all the time? You've been here for months now. You're hardworking. You could treat yourself. The assistant hesitated before answering. I will someday, she said softly. But right now I'm saving money for my siblings' school fees. My parents passed away a while ago, and I've been trying to keep things steady for them. The manager froze. She hadn't expected that answer. She had assumed carelessness, not sacrifice. I see, she said after a pause, her voice much gentler. I didn't know. The assistant smiled faintly. It's okay. Most people don't ask. After she left, the manager sat alone for a long time thinking. The laughter, the teasing, the looks she'd given. They all replayed in her mind like echoes. She had mocked something that symbolized strength, not weakness. Those old shoes she had laughed at had walked through hardship she couldn't even imagine. That evening, as the office emptied out, the manager stayed behind. She opened her drawer and looked at her collection of business cards and awards, things she had once been proud of. Yet none of them seemed to mean as much as that quiet act of kindness from someone she had belittled. When she finally left for the day, she returned the flats to the assistant's desk with a note. "Thank you for your kindness today. You reminded me that value doesn't come from what we wear but what we do." The next morning, when the employee found the note, she smiled softly. She didn't say anything, but when the manager passed by her desk later, she greeted her with a warm, "Good morning." The manager smiled back, genuinely this time. From that day, something between them began to change. The teasing stopped completely. Instead, the manager began noticing the little things, how the assistant stayed late to help others, how she always greeted people kindly, and how she carried herself with quiet strength. But deep down, the manager couldn't shake off the guilt. She wanted to make things right, to show that she had truly learned from her mistake. She just didn't know how yet. As she sat in her office that afternoon, watching the young woman move gracefully around the workplace, she thought to herself, maybe it's time I start learning from her. What she didn't realize was that the biggest lesson was still waiting, one that would change not just her attitude, but how everyone in that office saw kindness, respect, and humility forever. The next few weeks brought small but noticeable changes in the office. The manager's tone softened, her jokes disappeared, and the team started to sense something different in her attitude. She greeted people more kindly and listened more than she used to. No one said anything openly, but everyone could feel it. It was as if a wall had quietly come down. The assistant continued working with the same quiet dedication as always. She didn't seem to expect any apology or special treatment. She simply did her job, helping others when they needed it. Always patient, always calm. But there was a new respect in how the manager looked at her now. One morning, the manager called her into her office. The tone of her voice was not sharp or commanding, but warm. "Can you sit for a moment?" she asked. The assistant nodded, a little curious. The manager took a breath before speaking. "I wanted to thank you again for what you did that day. I was embarrassed, and you helped me anyway. You didn't make me feel small, even though I've done that to you before." The assistant stayed quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Sometimes people say things without thinking." "I understand." Her words were simple, but they carried grace. The manager looked at her with admiration. "You shouldn't have had to understand. I was wrong. I made fun of you, and I shouldn't have." "I'm sorry," the assistant smiled gently. "It's okay. You don't owe me an apology. I'm just glad everything worked out." But the apology did matter, maybe more than the assistant realized. It was the first time in a long while that the manager had looked inward and truly questioned her own behavior. That afternoon, the manager found herself watching the assistant from across the office. She noticed the way she treated everyone, with kindness no matter how they acted toward her. When someone from marketing snapped over a delayed file, she apologized and fixed it without complaint. When a delivery guy came in drenched from the rain, she offered him paper towels and a warm smile. It wasn't an act. It was simply who she was. Later that week, during lunch, the team sat together chatting about random things. Someone mentioned a charity event happening nearby, a fundraiser for children in need of school supplies. The manager glanced at the assistant and noticed a flicker of interest in her eyes. "Do you volunteer for things like that?" the manager asked casually. The assistant nodded. "Whenever I can. I grew up getting help from people like them. So now, I like to give back when possible." The manager nodded thoughtfully, her respect for her growing even more. After lunch, she quietly made a call to the charity organization, offering a company donation in their name. She didn't tell anyone, but she planned to let the assistant handle the coordination, knowing it would mean something to her. When the news came out that the company was sponsoring the event, everyone was surprised. The assistant was chosen to represent the office. The manager smiled as she saw her reaction, genuine excitement and gratitude. That weekend, the two of them attended the fundraiser together. It was held at a small community center, filled with children laughing and volunteers sorting books, uniforms, and food items. The assistant moved around naturally, helping kids pick out supplies, chatting warmly with parents, and working long after most people had taken breaks. The manager stood at a distance watching her. It was humbling. She had spent years chasing perfection, the right image, the right clothes, the right words. But here was someone who seemed to make an impact just by being kind. On the drive back, the silence between them felt comfortable for the first time. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a soft golden sky. The manager finally spoke. "You know," she said slowly, "I used to think people respected me because I looked successful, but today made me realize I was wrong." The assistant smiled gently, looking out the window. "People remember how you make them feel, not what you wear." The manager laughed softly. "You're wiser than you look," the assistant chuckled. "I've learned a lot from life. It teaches lessons in unexpected ways." When they got back to the office, the atmosphere felt lighter. People noticed how the manager now treated the assistant with genuine kindness, even admiration. She often praised her work during meetings and encouraged others to do the same. One afternoon, the manager invited her for coffee after work. They sat at a quiet cafe nearby, and for the first time, they spoke not as boss and employee, but as two people sharing stories. The assistant talked about her siblings, how the eldest was studying to become a teacher, and how she sent money home every month to help with bills. She mentioned how she had been working since her teenage years, first at a bakery, then a call center before landing this job. The manager listened quietly, feeling a mix of admiration and guilt. "You've done so much on your own," she said softly. "I've had to," the assistant replied. "But it's okay. It's made me strong. I just remind myself every day that there's always something to be thankful for." The manager nodded, her throat tightening. For years, she had judged people by their clothes, their speech, their confidence, never realizing that true strength often hides behind quiet faces. The next morning, the manager arrived early, something she rarely did. She saw the assistant already at her desk organizing files. For a moment, she just watched her work, the focus, the calm, the quiet kindness that filled the air around her. "Good morning," the manager said warmly. "Good morning," she replied with a smile. The manager hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking. You've been handling more than your share of work lately, and you do it better than anyone. I'm recommending you for a promotion." The assistant's eyes widened slightly. "Really? You've earned it," the manager said firmly. "You deserve recognition for what you bring to this team, not just your work, but your attitude." For a moment, the assistant looked too surprised to speak. Then her eyes softened. "Thank you. That means a lot to me," the manager smiled. "It's the least I can do." That day, the whole office buzzed with good energy. The assistant's promotion became official within a week, and everyone celebrated with cake and laughter. Even the ones who had once laughed at her shoes came forward to congratulate her. During the small celebration, the manager made a short speech. "Sometimes," she said, glancing at her assistant, "we forget that success isn't about looking important. It's about being kind, showing up, and making a difference. And I've been lucky enough to learn that lesson from someone right here among us." Everyone clapped, and the assistant looked down shyly, smiling. Later that evening, when most people had gone home, the manager walked over to her desk. "You've changed this place," she said quietly. "You've even changed me," the assistant laughed lightly. "I think we've both learned something," the manager nodded. "Yes. I learned that the best shoes to walk in are the ones that carry kindness, not pride." The assistant smiled, touched by the words. She didn't know that the manager had already planned one more gesture, something she hoped would show just how much she had learned. And that small act, which she would do in the days to come, would seal the final lesson in a way neither of them would forget. The office had a different energy after that long and honest conversation. The manager wasn't the same person she had been before. The sharp tone in her voice had softened, and the wall she had built around her authority had started to crumble. For the first time, people noticed her smile without fear or judgment behind it. She began greeting everyone in the morning, not just the senior staff. She even joined the team for lunch, something she hadn't done in months. The young employee kept working quietly as she always did, still wearing those same old shoes. But there was something different about the way she walked now. Her steps felt lighter, as if a small burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The silent humiliation she had carried for weeks had been replaced with quiet dignity. She didn't hold grudges. She didn't talk about what happened to anyone else. She just kept doing her work and helping where she could. The rest of the team had also started to see things differently. Those who once laughed along with the manager now felt embarrassed by how easily they had followed her lead. One of them even apologized to the employee during a coffee break, saying, "You didn't deserve that. I should have said something." She just smiled and said, "It's okay. It's all in the past." But deep down, those words meant more to her than anyone could know. A week later, the company announced a small team event, a casual evening gathering to celebrate the completion of a big client project. Everyone was invited, and this time, the manager insisted on personally organizing it. It wasn't just a formal dinner like usual. She planned something simple and warm, like a family-style evening with laughter and games and small speeches. No one expected that from her, and that alone showed how much she had changed. When the day arrived, everyone gathered in the decorated conference hall. There was soft music playing, light food on the tables, and cheerful chatter echoing around the room. The young employee stayed near the back, quietly enjoying her juice while others mingled and joked around. The manager, wearing a calm smile, took the microphone to make a short speech. She started by thanking everyone for their hard work. Her voice was steady but carried emotion. "This project," she said, "was not just about meeting targets. It reminded me of something more important, how much we depend on one another, and how kindness can make work so much better." Everyone clapped politely, but they didn't know yet what she was leading up to. Then she paused and looked toward the back of the room. "There's someone here tonight who has reminded me what real strength and dedication look like," she continued. "Someone who showed up every day, gave her best, and never complained even when things were unfair." The room fell silent. The young employee's eyes widened slightly, not expecting her name to come up. The manager gestured for her to come forward. Hesitant at first, the employee slowly made her way through the crowd. People watched with curious smiles. When she reached the front, the manager looked her in the eye and said softly, "You have no idea how much you've taught me." Her voice trembled slightly, but it was genuine. "I owe you an apology, not just for my words, but for the example I set. You showed me what grace really means." The employee didn't know what to say. She simply nodded with a faint smile, her eyes a little wet. The room broke into applause, not because of the drama, but because everyone felt the sincerity in that moment. It wasn't about a boss and a worker anymore. It was about two people understanding each other as human beings. After the event ended and people began leaving, the young employee returned to her desk to pick up her bag. When she got there, she found a small box resting on her keyboard. There was a simple note taped to the top. She opened it and saw a brand new pair of shoes inside, simple, elegant, and clearly chosen with care. The note read, "Thank you for reminding me what real strength looks like." She stood there quietly for a while, staring at the note, her heart full. It wasn't about the shoes. It was about what they represented: respect, humility, and a genuine change of heart. The next morning, she wore those new shoes to work. They weren't flashy, but they fit perfectly. When she walked in, the manager greeted her with a warm smile and said, "They look good on you." There was no teasing, no sarcasm, just kindness. The young employee smiled back and replied, "Thank you. They feel right." From then on, the relationship between them transformed completely. The manager began mentoring her, helping her grow in her career. She gave her more responsibilities, trusted her with client meetings, and even asked for her opinions in strategy sessions. The employee, who had once been invisible to most, became one of the most respected people in the office. Not because of her clothes or her shoes, but because of her integrity and heart. The others noticed the shift too. The entire office culture started to change. People became more careful with their words, more supportive toward one another. Small acts of kindness became common, sharing lunch, helping each other with tasks, or simply asking how someone's day was going. It was like one simple lesson had rippled through everyone. Respect costs nothing, but it means everything. Months passed and the company grew busier. The young employee's hard work didn't go unnoticed. During a quarterly meeting, the manager announced a promotion. "This person," she said proudly, has not only shown excellence in her work but has inspired me personally to become a better leader. When the employee's name was called, everyone stood up and clapped. It was a moment that felt right in every way. As she accepted the promotion, she looked around the room and thought about how far she had come, from being the quiet newcomer mocked for her shoes to standing in front of everyone as an example of strength and humility. She didn't say much, just a simple heartfelt thank you, but her smile said everything. After the meeting, the manager stopped her in the hallway. "You earned this," she said. "I'm proud of you." The employee nodded and replied, "I'm grateful you believed in me." They both shared a small, genuine smile, one that carried mutual respect and understanding. From that day forward, the two worked together not as boss and employee, but as equals in purpose. The manager never forgot the lesson she learned, the kind that no leadership book could ever teach. She realized that true leadership wasn't about power or authority. It was about empathy, listening, and admitting when you're wrong. The young employee, too, carried her own lesson from the experience that kindness, even in the face of cruelty, has the power to change people. She didn't need revenge or anger to prove her worth. Her quiet patience and hard work spoke louder than anything else ever could. The story quietly spread among the other departments, and soon, new employees would hear it as a reminder to stay humble and kind. It became something of a company tale, one that no one laughed about but everyone respected. And so, life in that office moved forward. There were still deadlines, long meetings, and stressful days, but something had changed in the air. People smiled more, helped each other more, and treated each other like human beings first and employees second. Every time the manager saw a new employee walking in, nervous and unsure, she remembered that one moment, the moment when she stood in worn-out shoes and learned what humility truly meant. And every time the young woman looked at her new shoes before work, she didn't just see a gift. She saw a reminder of growth, forgiveness, and the quiet power of kindness. Sometimes the smallest things, like a pair of old shoes, can teach the biggest lessons. And in that office, that lesson stayed alive in every step they took forward together.